order, please. Before we start the daily routine, I have a couple statements I wish to read. Honourable members, it's been brought to my attention that I've misspoken during an interview last evening with the CBC, and my laments involved matters surrounding the proposed speaker's dinner. And I can't remember exactly word for word but what I said, but it was certainly not my intention to cast aspersions upon some or any members of this House, nor to speak in any partisan fashion. And if my comments in any way were interpreted as such, I'm truly sorry. And if I offended any member of this House, I truly apologize. I am your Speaker and active Speaker for all members of this House, and certainly earnestly want to retain the confidence of all of you. Thank you. The second matter, last week the member from Cumberland South asked about our question period, our length of questions and answers, the number of complete questions that we had. So I asked my staff to do some research, and over the last 2-year period, the average number of questions completed on a Tuesday and a Thursday, our 1-hour session, had been 14.41. And last week on Tuesday we completed 14 questions, and on Thursday also we completed 14 questions. And over the last 2 years, the average number of questions completed on a Wednesday, our hour-and-a-half session, has been 20.9 questions. Last week on Wednesday we completed 19 questions. So we're close. We're, I think, within the average of the question period over the last 2 years. And I would certainly ask that all members, whether you're asking a question or whether you're answering a question, to try to be as concise as possible. Again, thank you for your cooperation. Now, before we go to the daily routine, I want to announce that the motion under Rule 5.5, the late debate topic, submitted by the Honourable Member for Kings West. Therefore, it be resolved that the House of Assembly acknowledge the shortcomings when it comes to delivery around the delivery and execution of the Caregiver Allowance Program. And again, that will be heard during the interruption at 6 p.m. Daily routine, presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Table and reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of the Public Service Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the theme of the 2009 Halifax Pride Week was breaking down walls, building bridges, and whereas 2009 Halifax Pride Parade marks the second year that the Nova Scotia Public Service Commission and the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union participated together in the parade, and whereas the Government of Nova Scotia is committed to being a workplace that values diversity and is representative of citizens of Nova Scotia, therefore be resolved that all members of this House congratulate the leaders and staff of the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union and the Nova Scotia Public Service Commission for their involvement in the 2009 Pride Parade. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member of the Public Service Commission.
Speaker, I do this on behalf of the Premier.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Government of Nova Scotia has adopted the principles of openness, transparency and accountability, and the Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act gives Nova Scotians right to access to information in the custody or under the control of public bodies. And whereas the access to information ensures citizens of Nova Scotia have the opportunity for meaningful participation in the democratic process, and whereas the celebration of the right of Nova Scotians to access information will facilitate informed public participation and policy formulation, ensure fairness in government decision-making, and permit the airing and reconciliation of divergent views. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize and celebrate Right to Know Week from April 28th to October 2nd. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of EMO.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Atlantic hurricane season is a time to remind Nova Scotians of the importance of being prepared, and whereas during hurricane season, individuals should remember to have their emergency plans and kits ready, and whereas today, September the 29th, marks the 6th anniversary of Hurricane Juan, one of the most powerful and damaging hurricanes to hit our coast. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House take a moment to remember those we have lost and those who have suffered damages during Hurricane Juan in 2003 and acknowledge the critical importance of preparedness. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Any further government notices of motion? Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 27 of the Acts of 2000, the Employment Support and Income Assistance Act.
The Honourable Member for Hants West begs leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 27 of the Acts of 2000, the Employment Support and Income Assistance Act.
Bill number 23, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 27 of the Acts of 2000, the Employment Support and Income Assistance Act.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be introducing this bill as the Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 345 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Pipeline Act.
The Honourable Minister of Energy begs leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 345 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Pipeline Act.
Bill 24, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 345 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Pipeline Act.
Order that this bill be read a second time on a future day. Any further bills? The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989 of the Motor Vehicles Act.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations begs leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill number 25, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order this bill be read a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1928, the St. FX Board of Governors asked Dr. Moses Cody to establish the university's Extension Department, appointing him its first director, and over the next two decades, this successful work became known worldwide as the Antigonish Movement. And whereas in 1959, the university established the Cody International Institute to provide programs that promote education, innovation, group action, and sustainable economic activities for disadvantaged groups around the world. And whereas this year celebrates the 50th anniversary with the grand opening of the Cody International Center at St. Francis Xavier University, Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly join me in extending our appreciation to the Coady International Institute for their continued commitment, congratulating them on this milestone and wishing them every success in their future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Food and Restaurant Association is celebrating their 65th anniversary in 2009 and is one of the largest employers in Nova Scotia with 30,000 direct employees. And whereas Nova Scotia's restaurant industry provides nearly 1 in 5 jobs for people under the age of 25, and whereas the Canadian Restaurant and Food Association has solid representation in Atlantic Canada under the direction of Vice President Luc Rejavec, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly extend our warm regards to the new National President Garth White, Luc Rejavec, and the 30,000 restaurant employees in Nova Scotia who do so much on an outstanding job during year-round in providing delicious meals to their thousands of customers. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Truro Bible Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jake McKenzie of Truro, Nova Scotia, won the American National Jiu-Jitsu Championship, lightweight adult brown belt at California State University, California, on September 13th, 2009, and whereas Jake has competed in 14 international jiu-jitsu tournaments this season and earned medals in 10, including 8 gold. And whereas Jake's athletic lifestyle and ambition for success makes him a role model in our community, therefore let it be resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Truro's Jake McKenzie on his international jiu-jitsu success and wish him all the very best in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could make an introduction first.
Certainly.
Draw your attention to the West Gallery, where we have a number of citizens from Kingston area today. And if they would rise, and when I introduce them, Evelyn McLean, Barb Hildebrand, Lynn and Rick Can, Lila White, Wanda Bezanson, and Wanda is the widow of former MLA Frank Bezanson, who served 2 terms here in the 70s. Marg Bungay and Vicky Parker. And Vicky has a connection, actually, to the resolution that I'm about to read. But first of all, we would give them a warm welcome today. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1960, the Kingston Steer Barbecue was started to promote the cattle industry, and whereas for the past 50 years, the cattle producers and the community at large have come together in celebration of this industry's contributions, and whereas agriculture is the driving force behind the economy of many communities throughout Kings County, and the cattle industry is a significant part of the stimulus. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House recognize the importance of the Kingston Steer Barbecue and congratulate R.A. Boat, C.C. McMaster, H.O. Stronach, L.B. Foster, C.V. Ross, L.R. McMaster, E.G. Pierce, R.G. Sims, G.F. Balcom, and W. Hellman for starting the barbecue in 1960. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas September 29, 2009 marked the 20th anniversary of the Nikhil Home for Special Care located in Argyll, Yarmouth County. And whereas staff were hired in September of 1989 and Nikhil admitted its first residents in December. And whereas the home currently employs 70 full-time and part-time staff who care for 35 seniors as well as a small population affected by chronic illness and or disabilities, and has a long wait list with a full occupancy since opening. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating the Board of Directors, Administrator Bertha Brannan, their dedicated staff and volunteers of Nikhil Home for Special Care, and thanking them for maintaining the quality and excellence of care over the past 20 years, and wish them continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas RCMP Corporal Mike Lidstone of Sackville works at RCMP Detachment in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and whereas Corporal Mike Lidstone is a wrestling coach who believes in boosting self-esteem or boosting kids' self-esteem through sport and has helped implement wrestling tournaments in British Columbia and Ontario, and whereas Corporal Mike Lidstone was a leader in the organization of the Atlantic High School Wrestling Festival held at Sackville High School in February 2009, which drew 366 junior and senior high students from across the Maritimes. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly commend RCMP Corporal Mike Lidstone of Sackville for leading the organization of the Atlantic High School Wrestling Festival held at Sackville High School in February 2009 and wish him much success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on July 7th, 15-year-old Adam McNeil of Middleton won the 2009 NSGA Midget Championship. And whereas Adam sat in 5th place heading into the tournament final, but steady play during the final round allowed him to climb up the leaderboard and capture his first provincial championship. And whereas this placement qualified him to play in the 2009 Junior Golf Championship at Seaview Golf and Country Club in Sydney, therefore be it resolved the members of the House of Assembly join in congratulating Adam McNeil for this outstanding accomplishment and wishing him every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Music Competition is a national organization working in the field of classical music with the goal of supporting and encouraging young Canadian performers. And whereas saxophonist Evan Mounts from Brooklyn, Hants County placed first in the national finals in the winds category for his age group and was given a 95% overall grade during the competition against top musicians from around the country. And whereas the International Stepping Stone offers musicians at the dawn of their career invaluable experience and opportunity, as well as encouragement to grow as performers and develop their artistic personality. Therefore, be it resolved that all members in this House of Assembly applaud the accomplished musical talent of Evan Mounts and encourage him to continue to develop his artistic personality and continue to elevate as a musician. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Moosehead Dry won their 15th Nova Scotia Senior Baseball League title on September 17th at Baisley Field in Dartmouth, and whereas they took first place in Game 4 against the Halifax Pelham Molson Canadians with a score of 6-3, and whereas the Dartmouth Moosehead Dry team is three-time Canadian senior baseball champions, therefore be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Dartmouth Moosehead Dry men's baseball team on their win and wish them continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 29th annual Terry Fox Run was held on September 13th in the North River area of Victoria County, and whereas 30 participants from the North River North Shore area ran, walked and biked on the Murray Road along the scenic North River, and whereas almost $1,700 was raised in the community to continue Terry's dream. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate and thank the residents of the North River North Shore area and indeed all Nova Scotians for their participation in the 29th annual Terry Fox Run. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Cape Breton Search and Rescue Association will celebrate their 40th anniversary on Saturday, November 21, 2009. Whereas the Cape Breton Search and Rescue volunteers have contributed much to the community of Cape Breton over the years. And whereas these citizens give freely of their time to assist in the rescue of those in distress, therefore be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate all those involved with the Cape Breton Search and Rescue Association and wish them continued success in the future. I'd ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 275 years ago, the first lighthouse in all of Canada was erected in Louisbourg, and whereas this historic community proudly treasures all pieces of its fascinating and storied past and draws people from far and wide to experience what Louisbourg has to share, and whereas many individuals worked hard to develop a proper tribute to this remarkable structure, and groups like the Louisbourg Lighthouse Society, Coastal Connections Trail Association, and the Louisbourg Youth Group are all worthy of gratitude. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate organizers promoting the 275th anniversary of the Louisbourg Lighthouse and thank them for drawing future attention to our proud heritage. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Michel Maillat from Clare competed in the 35th Canadian Karate Championship in Calgary, Alberta in July of 2009, and whereas Michel finished second in the juniors men's Kumit 68 kilogram division in the tournament, and whereas Michel qualified to represent Canada at the Junior Pan American Karate Federation competitions from August 30th to September 6th in El Salvador, therefore be resolved that members of this House of Assembly congratulate Michel Maillat for winning a silver medal at the Canadian Karate Championship and wish him continued success in future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Florence Volunteer Fire Department is vital to emergency service support as well as community service under the leadership of Chief Dave Julian, and whereas the fire department constructed a new complex complete with lounge, hall, and museum space to better serve the residents of Florence and surrounding areas, and whereas the department presided over a fire they wouldn't put out, as the recently celebrated burning of their mortgage, thanks to community support and government partners, enabling them to focus on enhanced programs and services rather than monthly mortgage payments. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Chief Julian, the officers, members, and volunteers, wishing them well as they continue their work meeting some of the community's greatest needs. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bedford resident Laura Osborne was a typical teenager when 3 years ago she was diagnosed with adult-onset metachromatic leukodystrophy, and whereas Laura is a remarkable young woman who has faced this challenge with dignity and courage and has earned the respect and admiration of her community, and whereas there are no traditional forms of treatment available to MDL patients, and all experimental treatments are not covered by health plans and are extremely expensive, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Rick Gunn, Nancy Johnson, Sylvie Cookhand, and the members of Bedford United Church for organizing a musical tribute night in honor of Laura Osborne on Saturday, September 26, 2009, to raise much-needed funding for her care. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia International Air Show was held on September 12th and 13th at the Yarmouth International Airport, and whereas this year's event held special significance as it marked the 100th anniversary of flight in Canada, and a fitting tribute was provided to Canada's own snowbirds, and whereas over 10,000 enthusiastic spectators turned out to watch the impressive show and proved yet again that Yarmouth is a premier destination to hold world-class events. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly congratulate the people of Yarmouth for supporting and hosting the Nova Scotia International Air Show, while also encouraging organizers to continue and bring the show back for many years to come. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Glace Bay Seniors and Pensioners Club was the recipient of the Nelson Muse President's Award from the Cape Breton Council of Senior Citizens and Pensioners, and whereas the President's Award is presented each year to a Cape Breton Seniors Club that best serves the needs of seniors in their community, and whereas under the guidance of President Bernie Petrie, Vice President Joe Canary, Treasurer Stephen Andrektrick, and Secretary Barbara Shea, therefore be it resolved the members of the House of Assembly recognize the volunteers and congratulate the Glace Bay Seniors and Pensioners Club. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas at the end of May 2009, Heather McRae and Carrie Ann Watson returned home from Ghana after signing on with projects abroad to help build an orphanage in Tin Kong, Ghana. And whereas realizing much more needs to be done, Heather and Carrie Ann are returning to Ghana and will be helped in their efforts by Mary Somerville, who is going to Ghana with the Volunteer Abroad organization in the spring. And whereas Heather and Mary's employer, the Bedeck Lobster Suppers, have offered a fundraising dinner on October 10th, with proceeds going towards the orphans and Mary's work in Ghana, where she'll be conducting home visits, assisting with prenatal care, and much more. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this legislature applaud Heather, Carrie Ann, and Mary for their tremendous humanitarian work, and thank the Bedeck Lobster Suppers for their support for those less fortunate. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas grade 7 student Logan McGilvray from Bedford Junior High has demonstrated his commitment to help students in Sierra Leone, and whereas Logan shipped his first crate of supplies last year and has continued his request to collect additional school supplies and furniture, which have now been crated and shipped, and whereas Logan is working with the International Centre for Peace and Development Studies to furnish a multi-purpose centre in Sierra Leone, which will house a computer room, arts and music rooms, and outdoor recreation facilities, therefore be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly recognize the hard work and generosity of Logan McGilvray that he has exhibited and wish him continued success in future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas encouraging and rewarding achievements of our young athletes builds a strong foundation for a healthy and active lifestyle. And whereas Peter Gibson of Windsor, Hants County brought home the title from the Under-18 Outdoor Junior Atlantic Tennis Championships held in PEI in July 2009 after notching a straight set victory 6-3, 6-3. And whereas Peter has obtained the confidence and fortitude as a result of his latest achievement to be at the top of his game against the best from Atlantic Canada as he competes in the 2009 Canada Games and future competitions. Therefore, be it resolved that MLAs in this House of Assembly applaud Peter Gibson on his determination and commitment and wish him continued success as he pursues his next tennis challenge. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Maureen Clements, President of the Glace Bay Elementary Home and School Association, was named Volunteer of the Year by the Provincial Home and School Association, and whereas the award is given each year in recognition of volunteer services, and whereas Maureen was presented this prestigious award for her leadership qualities, compassion, empathy, and friendship to her school community of Glace Bay Elementary School. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate Maureen Clements as the Nova Scotia Federation of Home and School Associations Volunteer of the Year. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Bretoner Brian Neville recently completed an 8,245-kilometre cycling journey that took him all across our vast and beautiful country. And whereas Brian, at 62 years of age, completed this amazing 3-month voyage in which most men a third of his age could not even begin to fathom. And whereas Brian's inspirational journey underscores just how powerful one's drive and determination can be, while also proving to one that all that dreams can indeed become true. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly applaud and acknowledge Brian Neville's amazing accomplishments and wish him well in his future endeavours. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the annual Berwick Sports Hall of Fame induction ceremony took place June 6, 2009, celebrating locals' accomplishments in sport. And whereas the 1971 Berwick Alpines men's fastball team was inducted in this year's ceremony in recognition of their accomplishments on the field. And whereas Art Newton contributed to the success of the 1971 Berwick Alpines men's fastball team as the president, therefore be it resolved, members of the House congratulate Art Newton of the 1971 Berwick Alpines men's fastball team for his induction into the Berwick Sports Hall of Fame. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas from September 24th to the 26th, Yarmouth hosted the third Nova Scotia 55-plus games, and whereas over 35 different events were offered to seniors in hopes of promoting the importance of physical activity, social interaction, and friendly competition, and whereas with 333 competitors registered, the events continue to grow, and the Yarmouth area has again raised the bar, as the accommodations and facilities for the games were second to none. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly congratulate Yarmouth for an excellent job they did hosting, while also congratulate all participants, seniors, for recognizing the importance of healthy and active lifestyle. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver. I did great.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I need to preface this that the Chris D'Entremont referred in this is not me, unfortunately. I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the final resolution. Whereas on May 23, 2009, Chris D'Entremont, a Yarmouth County native, received the St. John Ambulance Life-Saving Award at their annual ceremony in Halifax. And whereas Chris, a certified medical first responder, was called upon to perform CPR on his father, Andre, as his mother, sister, and family looked on. And whereas Chris, with the assistance of other emergency personnel, performed life-saving procedures for more than 20 minutes on his father, who unknowingly had a congenital heart defect. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in commending Chris D'Entremont on remaining calm in the face of a very difficult situation and in wishing his father, Andre, continued good health. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Celebrating Communities Award Night was recently held to honour the achievement of Nova Scotians from across the province for their excellence in the areas of community development, client service, collaboration, innovation and community development, outstanding youth leadership, and outstanding volunteer achievement. And whereas this year's event will also mark the inception of a new Community Service Award named for the late Harold Verge, longtime community leader known as the grandfather of community economic development. And whereas Truro entrepreneur and community leader Chris McDougall has been named the first recipient of this prestigious award. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House congratulate Chris and extend their appreciation for the leadership he has shown in our community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas St. Joseph's Elementary School in the community of Sydney Mines became the recipient of a prestigious award from the Let Them Be Kids, and whereas the school and community have raised $65,000 and plan to raise another $30,000 to construct an all-access, all-abilities playground to be called Miners Memorial Playground, and whereas the intent is to provide a safe, inclusive play area that all members of the community can enjoy and instill in our children the need and desire to help someone and make a difference in someone's life for the good of giving and not just because they get something in return. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating this outstanding group for their efforts to date and wish them every success as they continue their noble work. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. Orders of the day, oral questions put by members. Just a reminder again to members that no electronic devices during the question period time. And again, I would just ask that members direct their questions and answers through the chair. The honourable member for Richmond. Excuse me, member, one minute. The time is 2:48 and we'll go to 3:48. The honourable member for Richmond.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, Nova Scotians remain concerned regarding recent developments into the Police Review Board hearing examining the termination of a former Stellarton police chief. Our current Minister of Justice will be called to testify as one of the original complainants. While many see this as a conflict of interest for the Minister of Justice, the Premier has responded by transferring responsibility for the Police Review Board from the Minister of Justice to the Minister of Finance. The release from the government indicated that the Minister of Finance will oversee the Police Review Board on a temporary basis. My question to the Premier is, will he confirm that it is his intention to return responsibility for the Police Review Board to the Minister of Justice at a future time?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Police Review Board was moved temporarily from the Department of Justice to be overseen through the Minister of Finance, and yes, it will return.
The honourable member for Richmond on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Police Review Board is an adjudicative board. As such, applicants submit their applications, which is then reviewed by an advisory committee. This committee recommends a short list of up to 6 qualified candidates to the minister responsible, who then chooses a candidate for appointment. This appointment is later confirmed by Cabinet. Mr. Speaker, current members of the Police Review Board examining the firing of the former police chief of Stellarton know very well that they were appointed by the minister responsible for their board, and their potential reappointment will rest in the hands of the minister responsible. So my question again to the Premier, since the Minister of Finance only has temporary oversight of the Police Review Board, does the Premier not see the obvious conflict of interest in suggesting responsibility for the board will at some time return to the Minister of Justice?
The Honourable the Premier.
I want to thank the member for his question. I just want to respond to him by saying that the members of the review board, in fact, will come by way of recommendation to the Executive Council and be approved through the Executive Council.
The honourable member for Richmond on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier is well aware that the recommendations to Executive Council first come from the Minister, and it's the Minister of Justice who will be determining who gets reappointed and who doesn't get reappointed. Mr. Speaker, the other issue of importance in this matter is whether the proceedings of the Police Review Board will be public. While the Minister of Justice reversed his initial stance and now says he will publicly testify, he still maintains a publication ban should be in place for the other complainants. Mr. Speaker, such public hearings are of interest to Nova Scotians in ensuring the integrity of our administration of justice. 2 media outlets have sought intervener status and asked the board to allow the publication of evidence presented in the closed-door meetings held earlier in September. So my question is, will the Premier immediately instruct government lawyers to seek intervener status in this matter to ensure all information and evidence regarding this Police Review Board hearing remain open and available to Nova Scotians?
The Honourable the Premier.
I want to thank the member for his question. The answer to which is I don't intend to intervene in what the Police Review Board is doing. I have faith that they will follow the appropriate protocols, that the hearings will be held in accordance with their rules, the evidence that they want and seek will be provided, and that should assure the people of this province that the Review Board is acting appropriately.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you, which is to the Premier. Mr. Premier, I'm not sure if your Minister of Health Promotion and Protection knows Bud McGuinness, but if not, he is the manager of Antigonish Arena, and he is exceptionally upset with this government's decision over their announcement to cut $2 million from the rink revitalization program in Nova Scotia. He isn't the only one upset, Mr. Speaker, as Bud attended a meeting of the Recreation Facility Association of Nova Scotia in the last few days, and that association is equally upset. My question for the Premier today is, will he reevaluate the decision and put the $2 million back into to support such a valued program?
The Honourable the Premier.
The leader of the Conservative Party knows that it in fact was not a program. It had no criteria. There was no policy in place for its administration. It was simply a line item which was distributed by the former government in advance of the election campaign.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservatives on her first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the $2 million fund was to assist, and it was designed to assist aging rinks across Nova Scotia. Nearly 75 rinks received a total of $4 million in funding over the previous 2 years. In ending initial loan, thanks to this government's decision of the past, the Arena Commission spent $7,200 on critical repairs to the refrigeration system, $4,200 for a new overhead door, $6,500 for repairs to the Zamboni. This is an example, Mr. Speaker, of how the rink revitalization program funds were used. How could this government, Mr. Premier, make this decision knowing the importance that rinks and arenas have to our local communities?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, although that is a budget question, the reality is that the former government put the province of Nova Scotia on an unsustainable path. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, they created extraordinary financial hardships for this province, which we're going to have to deal with. And this is simply the case that we are going to live within our means.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservatives on her final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's true that this government should be making some tough decisions. Unfortunately, they are not. Mr. McGuinness said today the Recreation Facility Association was bracing for some cuts, but they were not expecting the program to be dropped. Rinks from Windsor to Amherst to Antigonish to Cape Breton to Sackville to Yarmouth, a total of 74 communities. They are all disappointed. What does the Premier have to say to the hundreds of families in those communities who use these facilities on a daily basis?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much for the question. There are, of course, other programs through the Department of Health Protection and Promotion. Those communities are able to apply through those programs if they have particular projects that they think warrant or merit assistance.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Many people in Nova Scotia care for ill loved ones at home. For instance, in my riding, Matthew and Ghislaine care for their son with multiple challenges to his health and their 2 other teenage children. They were delighted when they were told they were eligible for the caregiver's allowance. But there was a catch, Mr. Speaker. They were told because they received social assistance, they would have the allowance clawed back by 70%. So my question for the Premier is, how can you justify this clawback in this family?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the Leader of the Opposition, as he knows, the design of the program is that the money will be taxed in the hands of the recipient. It becomes income in their hands.
The Honourable Order, please. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government considers the caregiver's allowance earned income under its rules of receiving social assistance. Surely, this government understands the financial drain on families caring for a loved one under these circumstances. So my question for the Premier is, why are you penalizing a family struggling to make ends meet when it is obvious they qualify for this program and they need help?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the Leader of the Opposition, we were very clear throughout the campaign that this would be taxed in the hands of the recipient. It becomes income. We made it perfectly clear throughout. That is the parameters. That is the parameters of the program, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many families in this province put the needs of their loved ones before their own. It is obvious they will bear a financial burden for doing so. That was the point of the Caregivers program. So to have money clawed back adds insult to injury for this family and other families across Nova Scotia. So my question to the Premier, will you commit to removing the clawback provision for families who qualify for caregivers under this program?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My response to the minister, the member of the opposition, or the leader of the opposition, is simply this: the design of the program was to tax the money in the hands of the recipient. That is where it gets taxed, and that, of course, and this, of course, is the exact program that was introduced by that government, that was endorsed by that member.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for...
University presidents, you didn't mind making that change.
Order, please. The member from Cape Breton South has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, the leader of our party just shared a story from one of his constituents who had their social assistance clawed back after receiving the caregiver allowance. My question to the Minister, Minister, can you please explain why your department is clawing back social assistance for those who qualify for the caregiver allowance? I'd like you to answer it, not the Minister sitting next to you, please.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question from the Honourable Member. This program was a program that was established and initiated by the previous government and endorsed by the Liberals, and so therefore this program is a program that was their former program that we will be looking at. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, social assistance and the caregiver allowance are provided for two different purposes. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker, to claw back income assistance from those that need it simply because they are caring for a loved one. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that the Elizabethan poor laws are alive and well in the province of Nova Scotia still in this day. My question to the Minister, again, why are you penalizing those on income assistance who provide care and support to loved ones?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for his question. The care program, it's very important to us in community services, and as with any program that is initiated, there's always opportunities to review and look at it and to make changes. We do care very deeply for those who are receiving the caregivers program and those who are accessing those programs. So each case is an individual case, and as I said, it is really important to us to understand the needs and to look and review the possibilities of what will come in the future with those programs.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's obvious to me that the NDP government now has a different slant on looking after those most vulnerable in our society than they did when they were sitting over here in opposition. They're still allowing the Department of Community Services to continue with their draconian policies in that department that affect those most vulnerable amongst us here in Nova Scotia. Shame on that government for allowing that to happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is just another example of the mismanagement of the caregiver allowance program. We have been hearing of the many people who do not qualify for the allowance. Now we know that even those that qualify face other obstacles when trying to care for their loved ones. Again, my question to the Minister, will your department end this practice of clawback?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the Honourable Member for his question, and I would like him to know that we do deeply care. We have been here.
The Honourable Minister has the floor. Let's let her answer her question, please.
We have been here for only 3 months, whereas the previous government was here for over 10 years. And through community services, there has been a lot of issues, and our staff is very diligent and works very hard, as the other opposition members do know that. And both departments, as soon as we were aware of the situation, our Department of Community Services did the right thing and has been speaking with the Department of Health, and we're in discussions and reviewing the program.
The Honourable Member from Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. During my tenure as Minister of Health, I was very proud of our work on the caregiver strategy. As a part of that strategy was a plan to add long-term care beds and facilities, of course, across the province to the system. Many communities have benefited by our hard work, and seniors are now capable to move into a home in their own communities. My question to the Minister of Health is how many beds will not be constructed because of the Minister of Finance's cuts?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to giving seniors as many options as we possibly can so that they can stay in their homes as long as they can and be in their communities, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, there have been no cuts to long-term care in the budget. And Mr. Speaker, we are on stream to open the same 800 beds that the former government had committed to open in the year 2010. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Argyll on his first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that answer. It's very heartening to hear that construction program will continue as we set it up. Mr. Speaker, the people of my community have been waiting for some time to see construction start at Nikhil Home for Special Care that I talked about today. As you're aware, the construction cost that came in on tenders from contractors was much more than the budgeted project price. Subsequently, the tenders were substantiated with numbers from Hanscom, which are the estimators used by the province. Yesterday, Nikhil celebrated the 20th anniversary and is looking forward to this next exciting phase. My question to the Minister of Health is, what news do you have for the seniors of Argyll that are awaiting these expanded services?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member, as he knows, I was very happy to meet with him and the administrator of Nikhil prior to the opening of this legislature and the introduction of the budget. We were aware that Nikhil were experiencing difficulties financially because of the rising costs of the project that they had proposed. And to the seniors of that member's community, I would say this government is very committed to keeping seniors in their homes and in their communities as long as possible. And we will certainly work with the honourable member and members of Nikhil to see what is possible, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on his final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the process that is in place should have protected this volunteer board for the numbers that they signed for in the service agreement. As the Minister knows, the numbers are based upon that service agreement signed by the group, based on numbers that probably were 2 years old or more that were put forward by the architect and the project manager. So, Mr. Speaker, Nikhil's project is in jeopardy, and an answer of extra funding is needed to be able to award that contract or have it expire tomorrow. When will Nikhil find out if they can renegotiate the service agreement to allow for the true cost of the construction at this site?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I would say to the honourable member again, we are prepared to work with any community and any group to see what is possible, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, last week and again today, the Minister has been presented with a number of specific cases that outline the obvious flaws with the caregiver allowance program. Mr. Speaker, these are real people and they deserve real answers from this government. Jean is currently at the Abby J. Lane Geriatric Unit, not by choice but by necessity. Despite receiving limited home care and personal care services, she was found unconscious after a fall that required hospitalization. Jean does not qualify for the caregiver allowance program. My question to the Minister is, where is the common sense in refusing to pay $400 a month for the caregiver allowance when we are currently spending over $1,000 a day to keep Jean in the Abby J. Lane?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the Caregivers Allowance Program is a program that was designed by the former government with the support.
Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Health has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was designed by the former government with the support and the encouragement of the opposition. And Mr. Speaker, it is a program that is targeted to people with very low incomes and very high needs. Mr. Speaker, it is not a program that is intended for every person in the program who is giving or receiving care of a family member or a friend or a neighbor, Mr. Speaker. Now, having said that, Mr. Speaker, there are problems with the program of the former government, supported by the opposition, and we, Mr. Speaker, will be making changes to improve the circumstances of caregivers in this province.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on her first supplementary.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, it's important that we say that we've heard twice from the Minister that this program was designed by others, supported by the Liberals. She neglected to say introduced by the NDP. She had every opportunity to do so. Mr. Speaker, this is an NDP program that we're currently looking at, and I'm asking about Jean, who is in the Abby J. Lane, currently the geriatric unit. In order to be discharged, she was told she must find more support at home, which she does have in place. In fact, it was suggested to her that she look into the caregiver allowance program, but she does not qualify. Her hopes have been dashed. She is now sitting alone and unhappy and unable to go back to her own home because of this impasse. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is, why is the caregiver allowance program so inflexible when it comes to meeting the needs of those who are in distress?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, like all new programs, you have to start someplace, I guess, Mr. Speaker. And I'll give the former government who designed this program some credit. They made a decision to start with people with low incomes and the highest needs, Mr. Speaker, and that was supported by the members of the opposition. Earlier in question period on this, somebody said to the government, well, you can change it. And I want to say to the members of the opposition, yes, we can.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on her final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to hear that change can come, because I'm going to ask that we reassess the situation for Jean, who's at the Abby J. Lane, and really sit down and look at the difference between $400 a month for the support she needs at home, or $1,000 a day to stay where she is right now in order to stay safe. And I'm going to ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, through you, will the Minister commit to reevaluating Jean and her needs for the caregiver allowance program so that she can go home where she belongs?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I would say to the honourable member, not only would we be prepared to reassess Jean with respect to the caregiver allowance, but we would look at what other programs and supports we might have to offer to Jean in the event that the caregiver's allowance isn't something that she would be eligible for, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. It was recently announced that the Roseway Hospital in Shelburne is to be closed every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in October. My question to the Minister of Health, and by the way, I'll table the closure release. My question to the Minister of Health: how does this meet with the Premier's campaign promise to keep every ER open?
Hear, hear. The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, as the former Minister of Health in the former government would well know, this is a problem that existed for well over 10 years. It's a problem that that government did very little about, Mr. Speaker. But we have a plan. We've announced our provincial advisor on ER closures. We have other measures that we will be rolling out, Mr. Speaker, in the coming weeks and months. And this issue is a priority for this government, and it's one that we will and are actively working to tackle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Argyll on his first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister knows that this government did lots of work in keeping ERs open, because not all ERs are experiencing the same kinds of problems. Let's look at Lillian Fraser, for example. Where there's a will, there's a way in solving these ER closures. During the recent general election, the NDP made pledges of maintaining all operating hours of all emergency rooms to remain open. A bold promise, but it was an emphatic promise made by the Premier to Nova Scotians, and it was rewarded with majority government. My question for the Minister of Health: what guarantees are you prepared to give to the residents of Shelburne County that they will have to access essential primary care in their region, especially since the MLA from Shelburne is content to sit back and say nothing about the ER closures now that he's in government?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I would say to the honourable member that my colleague, the member from Shelburne, and I have had numerous conversations about the quality of health care in Shelburne County, not only at Roseway, but throughout his entire district, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a plan for maintaining emergency rooms around the province. We begun that plan with the announcement of Dr. John Ross as our ER advisor, and we will be rolling out additional measures in the coming days and weeks, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Argyll on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the recent campaign, the MLA from Shelburne stated, and I quote, "The NDP has a common-sense plan to keep emergency rooms or emergency departments open and deliver the kind of health care that Shelburne residents expect and deserve." And I guess the NDP believe the people of Shelburne don't deserve much. My question to the regional member for Southwest Nova Scotia, using your words, and I quote, "With at least 10 scheduled closures during the month of June, Rodney McDonald can't be trusted to keep the emergency rooms open at Roseway Hospital." Minister, Roseway Hospital is scheduled to be closed for 12 days in October. Why should Nova Scotians trust you or your government?
Yes. Regional Minister.
Regional Minister. Regional.
Member, who is your question directed to? Who's your question directed to?
My question is referring to the regional minister for Southwest Nova Scotia, which is the member for Shelburne. So
you want
for his own community, right?
Do you want the Minister of Fisheries or the Minister of Health?
Minister of Fisheries.
Minister of Fisheries. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to assure the people of Shelburne County that this particular minister, this particular government is addressing the issues, Mr. Speaker. And I can assure you that if you go back and check Hansard, the same numbers that the member opposite introduced today, the same schedule, he had his numbers wrong. He talked about 98% of ERs being open. I can attest to you today, Mr. Speaker, that this minister is actually dealing with the issue. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I was contacted by a constituent about the challenges her family is having with the Caregiver Allowance Program. Mr. Speaker, my constituent provides care for her husband 24 hours, 7 days a week. She gets some assistance from home care and some from palliative care. Her husband suffers from psoriasis of the liver. His kidneys are failing. He has lung disease. As a result of his many years working in the coal mines, Mr. Speaker, he will never get better. They were told he was at a Maple Level 3, 2 points away from qualifying for the program. So on behalf of my constituent, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Health is, why does this individual or anyone like him not qualify for a caregiver allowance?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, this program is a targeted program. It's targeted at people whose assessment, with a home care assessment, results in what's called a Maple 5. Mr. Speaker, if people feel that they have been assessed inappropriately, then they can certainly ask for a review. And I would encourage the honourable member perhaps that that's what he should advise his constituents.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this constituent, my constituent, and many others in this province don't care about your Maple level, Minister. They don't care about your excuses, Minister. They are dying, and you are not helping the Minister. They are dying as we speak right now, and you can give them help, but you have refused, Minister. There are some very fundamental problems with this program. They can be fixed if this government cared. Mr. Speaker, when my constituent called about the program, no one came out to visit him. No one came to the House. They simply used the minister's Maple level to score my constituent. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know and I know people's circumstances can change very rapidly. So my question to the minister is, why is the minister not having assessments performed upon receipt of a caregiver allowance application instead of relying on these scores that may very well be out of date?
The Honourable Minister of Health. And again, I remind members to please direct their questions or answers through the chair. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, through you to the honourable member, there are a variety of reasons for which somebody may qualify for this program. They have to be assessed. They have to meet an income test. They have to have a certain number of hours of care per week. Not every person who is an applicant for this program will apply. The program designed by the former government with the support of the opposition is a program that is very targeted, and it's targeted to the people with the highest level of need and very low incomes, Mr. Speaker. And we communicated this clearly when we launched the program in August.
The Honourable Member from Glace Bay on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, let me ask the minister, if it was such a lousy program, why did you implement it? Why did you put the program into effect? I'll tell you why, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you why. They were so hungry for power, they put it through and said, hopefully everybody will like it. But they don't, Mr. Speaker. They don't like it. I've also heard that the continuing care staff has been given some new direction when it comes to notification about this caregiver allowance program. Mr. Speaker, the staff has been told not to send out notification of denial in writing. They've been told to call the applicant and deliver the news over the phone. Mr. Speaker, no doubt they've been told to do that to cover up any possible paper trail that might be there. So my question for the minister, my final question for the minister is, can she confirm whether that's the case and when exactly this new direction was provided by this government to staff?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I heard a number of questions there. Mr. Speaker, I want to table a release from the Liberal Party from the honourable member from Richmond when the program was launched, Mr. Speaker, in which he says, you know, this is a program that he fought for 9 years to restore. Perhaps he should speak to the member from Glace Bay and let him know that he was...
Order, please. Order. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health has the floor.
I'm not sitting down until I finish my answer. Mr.
Come on. The Honourable Minister of Health has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the member of Richmond would like to tell the member from Glace Bay why he was fighting so hard for this program for 9 years if the member from Glace Bay thinks it shouldn't have been introduced at all, apparently.
The Honourable Member from Yarmouth. Come on. The Honourable Member from Yarmouth.
Clap for you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. Last week, his department announced an investment of $2.5 million to Bowater Mersey in Brooklyn, Queens County. And our PC caucus supports the funding that Bowater received because the loss of jobs in rural Nova Scotia would be disastrous. My question to the Minister is, why did the province use the CD Trust Fund to support Bowater Mersey and not the IEF or NSBI?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, my response is this, is that the reason we didn't use the IEF is we had another fund that is available that doesn't cost the taxpayers any money. It's a fund that's made up of federal dollars. It's a fund that's made up of federal dollars, and staff did due diligence and qualified, hence the money was awarded.
The Honourable Member from Yarmouth on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Economic Development, on the day of the announcement, was unable to relate any details of the agreement, such as whether the company has to meet any goals to substantiate the investment or whether there was, in fact, any free provincial money in the CD fund. My question to the Minister is, did he understand what he was agreeing to when he authorized the $2.5 million with Bowater?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you, Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, yes.
The Honourable Member from Yarmouth on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's fantastic what a week can do for a minister. Mr. Speaker, last week the minister stated that he did not know if there was any provincial money in the Bowater deal, right outside these chambers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that raises grave concerns about the minister's ability to manage a complex and highly important portfolio. My question to the minister is, what other agreements has the minister signed without the details of the agreement and where the money is coming from?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, the answer is none.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier. In my first question to the Premier today, Mr. Speaker, I raised an issue of a constituent of mine who's having a clawback of 70% of their caregiver's allowance. During his answer, the Premier said, "We were very clear with Nova Scotians. The $400 would be taxable. Too bad, so sad." When my colleague from Cape Breton South asked the Minister of Community Services about this very issue, about reviewing the clawback provision of this program, the Minister, to her credit, said she would review this and you're reviewing it with the Department of Health. So my question to the Premier is, who's speaking for government, you or the Minister?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the Leader of the Opposition. First, I'd like to point out that I would never be flippant and say something like, too bad, so sad. In fact, these issues, these programs are very important to us on this side of the House. We know that many, many families in this province, I know the members of the opposition don't understand this, but many, many families in this province are in fact getting and being able to take advantage of the caregiver's allowance. I work every day with the Minister responsible for community services, and we all work together to make sure that what we deliver is the best programming for the people of the province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Premier just said many, many Nova Scotians are receiving this program. Last week, we requested the Minister of Health to table two numbers: the total number of people who have applied for the caregiver's allowance and the total number of people who have been approved for the program. At the time, the Minister indicated that she would have to call the DHAs to gather that information. A few simple phone calls over the past 3 working days, Mr. Speaker, would have produced an answer to that question, and the Premier just said in this House today that many, many, many Nova Scotians are receiving this program. So my question to the Premier, where are the caregiver allowance numbers that we requested last week?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Leader of the Opposition. They are being assembled and will be released in due course.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This program is flawed. Those who need help are being denied. This is about choices. Last week, your government chose to pay $353 million on a bill not due until next year, but you are turning your back on some of the most vulnerable families in our province. You delayed the implementation of this program for over a month. You were reviewing the program, but instead of changing it, knowing the flaws that existed in this program, you chose between paying a bill to universities in advance, setting aside $81 million to buy land that no other Nova Scotian knows what land it is. You set aside an additional
order, please.
53...
I'd remind the member that it should be directed through the chair, please. Order. I remind the member again that you should be directing your questions through the chair, not directly to the member. I'll recognize the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this government is doing is going forward with a program that is going to benefit families in this province who are caregivers looking after their loved ones. The program, as we pointed out, was the program that was there when we came into government. It is, of course, under review. We are looking forward to being in a position to put forward our own program in the following year, and that's what we'll do.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, during their entire history in opposition, current and past members of the NDP have lamented the lack of openness in government. For years, NDP members on the Human Resources Committee have complained that they should have access to the short list of applicants to agencies, boards and commissions in order for members of that committee to ensure that ministers had chosen the best qualified candidates. At the inaugural meeting of the Human Resources Committee under this new NDP government, I moved that the shortlist for committee appointments be provided to committee members to assist in our work, as had been advocated by the NDP for eternity. To my shock, Mr. Speaker, it was NDP government members who voted down that very motion. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is very simple. Why is the openness and transparency you fought for in government, in opposition, no longer a priority now that you sit in government?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member for Richmond. Of course, we intend to be open and transparent about the operations of our government. The member will recall that he was told that if he had a suggestion with respect to this committee, that he should go to the Committee on Assembly Matters. They deal with the mandates of the various committees.
Okay. The honourable member for Richmond on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, at a meeting of the Human Resources Committee on March 27, 2001, the member for Halifax Fairview stated, "The concern that I have as a new member of this committee is that I simply do not have the information before me that would allow me to say that these are the best possible people available to handle millions of dollars of public money." He went on further to say, "What I don't know, because apparently I am not entitled to know, is why the minister picked these people. Why did the minister go out and select the people that he called on? Among the people who responded to the ad, why did he pick them and not somebody else?"
Can you table that quote?
It's in Hansard, Mr. Speaker. I think your staff should be able to find it, but you can have it as well. My question is, now that the member from Halifax Fairview is the Minister of Finance, will he commit to providing members of the Human Resources Committee with the short list of applicants to all agencies, boards and commissions that fall under the Finance Department?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue about finding the very best person available is one that was very important to me since the time that I was first elected. And Mr. Speaker, what really hamstrung us during the time that we were in opposition was a system put in place by the Liberals when they were in government, and they didn't complain about it when they were the government. A system continued by the Conservatives when they were in government, Mr. Speaker. And I think the answer that's been given is simply one that I'll repeat, is that it's in the rules of the House, and it is for the House through the Committee on Assembly Matters to decide whether to change those rules. Certainly not within the scope of my responsibilities as the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond on his final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's pretty rich when you get that type of an answer from a member who was a self-proclaimed patron saint of government openness when he was in opposition. Now suddenly it's telling us, because of a technicality, according to them, that he cannot provide members of this House with the very information for which he fought for and which he lamented while in opposition. And Mr. Speaker, how rich to hear the chair of the committee say that a committee cannot make its own decisions, it needs to go to Assembly Matters. Mr. Speaker, talk about passing the buck. My question again to the Premier, when you spent so much time in opposition looking for openness and transparency, why are you now hiding behind a parliamentary technicality rather than providing Nova Scotians with the information you thought they deserved when you sat on this side of the House?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also remember, as the member for Richmond remembers, Mr. Speaker, how opposed the member for Richmond was to releasing that information when he was in government.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians have been going through the largest economic downturn our generation has known. While the federal stimulus plan is working throughout Nova Scotia, thanks to progressive Conservative cost-share investments, clearly what is not working is the government. Will the minister please inform this House of what, if any, measures he's undertaken over the past 100-plus days to help the economy recover and to get Nova Scotians back to work?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that staff at Economic and Rural Development are very, very dedicated. We are doing due diligence and finding jobs and employment and enticing new companies to come to the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to do that. This is one of the commitments that our government has made, and we will continue to work in the best interests of all Nova Scotians.
The honourable member from Cape Breton North on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't ask what his staff was doing. I asked what the minister was doing about economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, it's painfully obvious, and I mean painfully, to thousands who expected action from the promise everything, do little socialists. The minister was recently in Cape Breton to announce a $280,000 investment that was committed by the Progressive Conservatives. What Cape Bretoners did not hear is any action to address manufacturing closures, port development, the railway, tourism, nothing, not a zip from that minister, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister please inform this House what discussions he's had with Cape Breton businesses, the Sydney and Area Chamber of Commerce, the Cape Breton Partnership, or the tourism sector, and if he hasn't, explain why he won't consult with Cape Bretoners.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, and I guess I will let the entire House know, and it is true, I was in Cape Breton. While I was in Cape Breton, I visited with the Port Authority. I visited with some companies and organizations that are involved in tourism. I also visited with members of the African Nova Scotian community in Whitney Pier, where they had a huge reception for me, where over 50 people turned out. So, and Mr. Speaker, I must say that when I refer to staff, and this may be new to some members of the House, but I'm going to just take a second to boast a little bit, because what we have in economic and rural development when we talk about staff is we have a team effort. And there's no team in I. And we work together.
Okay.
We've entertained missions from India. Mr. Speaker, we've had companies here from Korea that I've attended dinners with and done some networking. Mr. Speaker, we are continuously.
Okay. Thank you, member. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The honourable member. The honourable member of Cape Breton North on his final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I heard the minister try to attempt to talk about teams and teamworks, but he's never talked about, nor has he demonstrated, leadership and leading, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Economic and Rural Development has fixated apparently on tea and photo opportunities instead of economic opportunities. The people of Cape Breton are clearly left wondering when he'll acknowledge that Nova Scotia exists beyond the McDonald-Mackay bridges. Will the minister inform this House what he has done or will do for Cape Bretons want-to-be working families?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I want to make note. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, I want to make note is that when we in economic and rural development talk about Nova Scotia, we don't try to divide the province of Nova Scotia. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that there are individuals that choose to pick a form to be negative about some of the nice about some of the nice.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker.
you may. Go
Thank
ahead,
you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the province of Nova Scotia, economic and rural development, and again, I have no problems with talking about the teamwork that, whether it be in SBI, in Novacor, all of the staff and employees at the,
Okay.
yeah, all the, you know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. The honourable member from Preston.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. Mr. Speaker, when the Black Cultural Centre appeared before Human Resources Committee last fall, all three parties agreed that the centre makes do with very few resources. My question to the Minister is, will the Minister recognize the importance of the centre, provide additional resources?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And certainly, this government recognizes the importance of the Black Cultural Centre of Nova Scotia. It serves the province of Nova Scotia very well. As far as the question about additional resources, that's a discussion for myself and the Black Cultural Centre.
The honourable member from Preston on your first supplementary.
Well, that's not a very satisfactory answer from the Minister. The public deserve to know what the Minister has planned for the Black Cultural Centre. The Black Cultural Centre, ever since it originally opened, has provided very important services to the people of Nova Scotia, recognizing the heritage and the history of the Black community in Nova Scotia. And this Minister should understand that. As the President of the Centre put it, the previous government considered its value to the province to be down by more than 50%. My question to the Minister is, do you consider the value of the centre to be down by 50% like the previous government did?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, through you, my response is, why should I, above anybody else in this House, recognize the issues in the province facing the Black Cultural Centre? Mr. Speaker, that kind of questioning, coming from an honourable member.
Come on, the Honourable Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture has the floor.
That kind of question, Mr. Speaker, coming from a member that represents the largest number of African Nova Scotians by an election, he should be ashamed.
The honourable member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the great demand for the work of the Black Cultural Centre has done is simply not without the resources is unbelievable. I know the Minister recognizes the value of this centre as his job as the Minister of Economic Development and Tourism. It could be a major attraction for tourism and economic driver for the region. There's no other centre like this anywhere in the country. My question to the Minister is, what are your plans to address the concerns of the Black Cultural Centre?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Recreation, or Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when the Black Cultural Centre approaches me, we will have that dialogue.
The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. Mr. Speaker, the economic recession has hit everyone hard, especially small business. In its May budget, the previous government had pledged to help small business by dropping the small business tax credit from 5 to 2.5%, over a 3-year period. Will the minister stand before this House today and commit to small business that he will indeed follow the previous government's lead, as they so like to say, it's our budget, and implement these tax cuts?
The Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think we've demonstrated so far our commitment to the business community of Nova Scotia. We've made some significant investments in. We've made some significant investments in Nova Scotia, and the member opposite should know full well, Mr. Speaker, some of the investments that we've made in West Hants in his own very jurisdiction. And Mr. Speaker, the question being, will we follow the example of the previous government? My response is, I hope not.
The time for oral question period has expired. I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during question period, the member from Argyll put a question, I think it was his second reply, and put it to the regional minister, Mr. Speaker, and I don't believe they are recognized in this House, and I would ask you to look into this further and give us a ruling, if you would, please.
I'll take it under advisement. I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Speaker, I wish you to now rise and the whole House resolve itself into committee, the whole House on supply.
The whole House on the Committee on Supply. The honourable member from Preston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to talk about conditions of roads in HRM, which is part of the area I represent, and the very serious concerns that that creates for many of our residents. Part of my riding is in the provincial area represented by the province, and the other part of my riding is represented by HRM. Well, I've got to say, in the last 6 years, the level of service in the rural areas is superior to the level of service in HRM, which is a huge change in the process. Fewer than 10 years ago, the roads in HRM were in better condition than they are in the rural areas, at least in my area. But today, now, we see a situation where the roads in HRM are in worse condition than they are in the province. Now, the province is in a financial crisis, which we identify has been a long time coming, but HRM at the same time has continued to increase taxes, either through assessment rises or increasing taxes, and yet the service levels haven't improved. And this is a very serious concern. And as the traffic volumes increase, the road conditions are getting worse, and also the problem is the traffic is getting worse. So we have two compound things that are happening here. There has to be a really sensible approach to curing this problem. As I spoke about recently, they put a fast commuter service in Cole Harbour, and very poor planning, lots of buses, lots of places for the bus to go, and I believe in buses. I think buses are part of the solution to the traffic problem in HRM, but they didn't provide enough parking, absolutely enough parking. So I was wondering who developed this process in HRM that said, okay, we can put tons of buses in this location, only enough parking for about 100 or 200 cars. It just doesn't make sense. The other problem with that sort of location is it's too far into the core. So you're not cutting traffic off traveling through Cole Harbour. This is just part of the problem. And there needs to be a common sense approach to traffic. When you come in the number 7 highway, 107 highway in the morning, there's a huge lineup. The traffic lights aren't timed properly. When you come from Cole Harbour, there's no lineup that way. So it needs to be adjusted slightly. And if they put a right turn lane, both in the evening for the evening traffic traveling east and the traffic traveling west on the 107 number 7 highway to allow the traffic to get to bypass, this would also ease traffic and move traffic through that intersection faster, allowing vehicles to get to Burnside much faster and not holding the other traffic up that's heading on into Dartmouth and Halifax and other locations. Just very simple things that could be done to indeed reduce the amount of time. And today when cars are sitting in traffic, it also hurts our environment. And when you look at that, and you look at the city, when I drive in the mornings, and I've noticed this for some time, there's a brown cloud that hangs over the city of smog. Now, when we used to think of Halifax, a very clean city, but this is all being added to by the traffic we have and the traffic held up. And setting at stoplights and waiting for as much as 20 minutes, half an hour at a location with the vehicles running, it doesn't help. So anything can be done to move this traffic on through would be a huge improvement for everyone in the community. I've requested from the former government that a bypass, a 107 bypass, be put through from the exit 17 in East Preston through and back onto the Montague Road, the end of Montague Road. That would take a lot of traffic through off Main Street. And indeed, there was, although the plans have been in place, engineering staff feel that's one of the main things that we should be doing. With discussions with them again, along with other programs they have, the government refused to fund this program. In the 70s, the land was purchased, most of the land, but yet the program isn't there. Almost all the plans are drawn up, yet the program doesn't go ahead. And this is not a huge $50 million project. This is a project of probably $5 to $6 million could repair and indeed take all this traffic off this area, and that would help traffic in Full Harbour, would help traffic all over from all the eastern shore heading into Burnside again, and alleviate the problems with traffic going into other areas like Dartmouth and Halifax as they cruise through in the morning. Well, years ago, not that many years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, the 107 highway, when you travel the 107 highway or the number 7 highway, very light traffic after hours in the evenings when off rush hour. But now the traffic is as bad now, after hours, non-rush hour that is, than it was during rush hour at least 10 years ago. And a rush hour is just bumper to bumper in both directions, and at least it travels at a good speed, at the speed limit 100 kilometers an hour, most of the time. But this is a serious issue. If we don't have a good transportation system, our economy is going to suffer from it, our environment suffers from it, and we all lose. And people have chosen to move out to the rural areas and to commute back and forth. And again, even from those rural areas like the areas I'm talking about in Mineville and East Preston and out into Porters Lake and Lake Echo, and even beyond that in other areas, people have chosen to live there because it's less expensive to live there, to buy homes, or it used to be that way, and it used to be lower taxes, but that's not the case anymore. Therefore, I really believe that we should be looking at a long-term traffic solution here to get people into the city easier. There should be a park and ride.
Order, please. There's a lot of chatter in the chamber, and I would recognize the member is speaking from Preston. I would just ask you to tone it down so we can hear the member. The honourable member from Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There needs to be a park and ride put down as far as Porters Lake or maybe even further to allow people to access the bus system on a regular basis so you can go through, you can get into the city easier, alleviate the problem, and probably make the bus system more successful. And I know HRM is working in that direction, but they need to move faster. The growth in the HRM, especially in the outlying areas, is really good. HRM tried to put a plan by design in there which has stunted some of the growth in the area, and that's going to be a problem in the future as time goes on for the communities. But they also have to look at traffic solutions. And some of the solutions that they would have, like I'm saying, are very inexpensive, can be very effective to ensure that people can easily commute back and forth to work and to medical appointments. We have a lot of seniors further east that have to travel to medical appointments at the hospitals on a regular basis, and it makes it very difficult for them, especially when they're not used to this high traffic volume traveling in the traffic. So it's important that we put these things in place and look at some of the things that can be done. Again, not expensive things that can be done to help alleviate this problem in the immediate future. Because we don't start really seriously looking at this, we're never going to solve the problem. You know, when they build roads now, they don't really, I don't think they really realize the kind of traffic volume we're talking about now. And as more and more people move to the rural areas, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Luckily, we have a lot of people in the rural areas that work from home. They have their business ventures there, or they work strictly from home, which that really helps alleviate our problem. And I congratulate the employers that are wise enough to do that in situations where it does make sense. However, not all people can do that, and it's necessary for people to physically come into the city, either out of the Burnside, which is a huge employer, or into other parts of Dartmouth and Halifax. But this is an issue that has to be addressed. I really feel it's time that the municipality and the province sit down together and said, what can we do to really address these traffic issues? You see all kinds of talk about a road here is going to be repaired, or a road there is going to be repaired, and those roads need to be done. There's no question about that. But we really have to look at the use of the roads and see which roads really need the work, really needs to see where the traffic is going, and see what we can do to adjust the traffic in a manner that it moves more smoothly. Less delays, and it makes it a lot better for everyone. But again, I can't see this. That hasn't happened. The municipalities talk about bus service, but they haven't looked at the areas where there's so much traffic coming from. Maybe it's because they don't realize, they haven't done the traffic studies that they should have been doing, and I suggest that probably they should be really looking at this in the future. The municipality spent a lot of money on a sewer system, $400 million, that presently one of the pumping treatment stations is having some great deal of difficulty. I think that should be totally investigated as well, because our tax dollars are paying for that, and it's really been difficult for the people on the water systems that are trying to pay this bill. And it again shows that there's some difficulties there that need to really be addressed, and need to be addressed for a long-term solution for all of us in the municipality, and indeed the province, because the province invested a substantial amount of money in that treatment system, and there really hasn't been a satisfactory explanation of why this thing has failed, and really when it's going to be back up on track again, and eliminate the terrible odor that's downtown for the people that work here every day, travel here every day, and as more importantly, probably, we live here and we can probably live with that. But if you have a tourist comes here on the cruise ships and